Thank you for staying with us right here on Bradama TV. My name is Chad Ratnam. This is The Nation This Week. I'm sitting in for my esteemed colleague, Eleno, who is not here today. But we've got a lot to talk about with regards to what's happened during the week. Lots been unfolding. Also, the whole Amber Heard, Johnny Depp story is coming to a close. Or the bigger question is, will it come to a close? Now, I have another amazing panel with me, and hopefully we have all of them online because being online is very tricky sometimes. We have Dr. Oe San, the senior fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. He's a much sought after subject matter expert on many stations. All of us are always hogging for you. To be on our channels, but thank you very much for doing this, Ehsan. We also want to bring in communication coach FARIDAH. She always says that she used to be journalist. I always think that she still is a journalist. Also meant to join us is Dr. MURALLITHARAN, the director at the National Cancer Society. Oh my goodness, Doc, you're here. We've been waiting for him all afternoon, and it's finally good to have you here with us. Now, so he's from the National Cancer Society, but why do we have him here? Because he's a man who's also, I had a conversation with him this week. He's also been a big part of the media fraternity. Started Youthquake back in the 90s, when I was about 5 years old, I think, Doc. Yeah, Youthquake and so many other
Sure,
things.
sure,
Yeah,
yes.
and he did the right thing. He did medicine, Farida. He did the right thing. He moved out from what we were doing. He did medicine, and yeah. Also, what I want to talk about is the Russian war and the Russian psychology. How the Russian people think, because you've been there, you lived with them. Apparently, you speak and write in the Russian language. So we're going to get there soon. But let's just take a look at what's happened this week in Malaysia before we get into anything else. So the big topic this week, I think, Asan, this is your area. BN just had its convention this Wednesday in conjunction with its 48th anniversary. So the PM has repeated his stance on not delaying GE15. Then on the other side, or down south, exactly from where we are, KJ was in Singapore, and he says Malaysia has to consider three main factors before calling for a general election, while noting the timing is entirely up to the prerogative of the Prime Minister. So he says the three main factors is public health, the momentum of the economic recovery, and political considerations. And the other big problem, Singapore might not have chicken rice very soon. Yeah, so this is a big problem. Ihsan, maybe you can talk about that later because you worked for a long time in Singapore too. So where do we begin with this? Let's start with politics first. Always a very sweet spot to start with. Now PKR also went through a little bit of a drama this week, and I know celebrities are clamoring to be in the limelight to get into politics. Why is this? Anyone else to go for this? Ihsan, we'll start with you. Why are celebrities trying to get into politics?
I think we will start with perhaps indeed the PKR election. You saw Rafizi Ramli, in a sense, winning the deputy presidency, and some of his teammates also won 3 out of 4 the vice presidential slots. So there are some who said it's a clear vote of no confidence against Anwar's leadership of the party. I would perhaps not go that far, but of course, there are murmurs, there are winds of dissatisfaction within the PKR because the party is seem to be somewhat devoid of a direction. So much so that in the last at least 3 state elections, it did or it performed very, very poorly. I think a lot of PKR members, because Rafizi is voted in by the members, and even though the number of the percentage of PKR members who came out to vote, I think it's less than 15%, but still, I mean, those who come out to vote would indeed like to have perhaps a somewhat fresher direction for the party. But I think a lot would depend on Anwar still, because Anwar remains the party president. It depends on how he would treat Rafizi, right? if he would indeed work hand in hand with Rafizi, giving Rafizi a free hand to more methodically and systematically do some electioneering for the party, then perhaps there's some light at the end of the tunnel. If Anwar were to repeat what he did to Asmin, then perhaps we are looking at another round of power struggle within the PKR. Then, of course, this week you also saw, sorry, I think that was late last week, you also saw Zuraida leaving the Bersatu Party and trying to join this
So I have to stop you here because what I didn't understand about that is when Bersatu came out to say that, okay, if we have someone now party leaving, we still have a quota for ministers' posts there. For me, this is like red flags that are coming up. So isn't the best person meant to be there for the job, or at least that's the basic way of moving forward from where we are at this point? Farida, I want to get to you with this.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gerard. The issue for me as a voter, and I've voted in every election since I was 21, which was quite a long time ago. I would say that I would simply say that as an observer, political observer, I am really, again, it feels like deja vu, because now is the time where all this horse trading is going to be going on, right? And there's also this issue with Zuraida moving out. There's now another split in where the votes are going to go. So that is, as you said very rightly, Gerard, that's a red flag. I also want to touch on something Ehsan said, which I think was very true. And I just like to add another thing to that. Ehsan was saying that PKR seems to be devoid of a direction, but I would also say they're lacking a national manifesto. The problem with PKR, from my perspective, is that they have always been the opposition party, and therefore they're always finding fault, which I can understand as an opposition party. But the problem is they do not have a national brand of how are they going to administrate the country. And that is what many voters want to know. I mean, we know all the problems that we're facing in this country, a whole host of them. But what are the solutions that they're going to come up with that are sustainable, and that people could look at them and say, yeah, you've really thought through some of these policies and how you're going to address them. So I think that is what is lacking. And I think if election is going to be in about a year, now is the time to start talking about what those policy changes would be.
Right. Very quickly now, we're going to move to Farida's topic quickly. Let's get some thoughts from Dr. Murali before we move on PKR.
So for me personally, again, as a voter, and wow, it's scary to say that I've also voted in every single election since a long time ago. And perhaps it's worth to note that the pizzazz has kind of died out. The drive has kind of died out for someone who was originally a young voter. There seems to be a lack of direction in where PKR is going. So for me now, it's more or less the same nasi lemak that everyone's offering, you know. So, and if it's the same nasi lemak, then the incentive, I think, to my generation of voters is not there. So rather than vote for another party, and you're seeing this all across the board, for us, it's just apathy. Then we just don't come out to vote at all. Nothing interests us in the process, and that is really worrying, because that is the general kind of thought patterns. Right. So people need to be relevant, I think.
Yeah. We can go on for half an hour with this, but I guess we need to move topics very quickly. Murali, please jump in wherever you need. Ehsan will come back to you, but Farida, let's move into your topic, your choice topic this week.
Okay, so my topic is about the Johnny Depp-Amber Heard verdict. So for those of you who may not have followed it, this is a quick nutshell. This was the famous actor Johnny Depp suing his ex-wife Amber Heard for defamation over an op-ed, which is the journalistic way of saying an opinion piece that she wrote in the Washington Post in 2018. In that defamation suit, he said that she defamed him as a wife beater and a wife abuser, even though she did not specifically name him in that article. However, he is saying that if you read the article, the only conclusion you can come to is that she's talking about him. So that's what the case was in about a nutshell. What happened was this trial took 6 weeks, and it was fascinating to watch. I did not watch it live as the case was going on. But what I did was I followed it on YouTube because I wanted to see what some of the experts were saying. And what I found was that there was a lot of experts who were criminal experts, forensic experts, mental health experts, defamation experts, who were evaluating the case on a day-to-day basis. And so for me, I just have to say, I learned so much about all these topics. But what I want to bring up today is basically two areas. One is the medical evidence versus the universe of communication. And this is where there is a problem, because the medical evidence did not support her claim, which is why the jury yesterday found in favor of Johnny Depp and awarded him the damages. If you listen to all the health or medical experts, the beatings and the injuries that she claimed she suffered were not supported by any photo evidence, which is very odd in someone who's been injured to that extent. The other part, which was what was really fascinating to me, was the whole universe of communication, which is body language, how you speak, your choice of words, how you tell your story. And in all of that, I think the unanimous feeling, at least on the ones that I watched, and even my own takeaway from that, was she was not believable in how she told the story. And so that was a really big problem, because I'll just give you a quick example. When she was talking about some of the injuries, she was not able to describe the injuries in detail, while all the experts who have dealt with domestic violence say you never forget because you're so traumatized. Johnny Depp, meanwhile, was able to give you in detail what had transpired. Also, her emotions on the stand shifted very fast, from like crying with no tears to she would be smirking in the court case. So this was all a problem, and I think the jurors felt it. I think this was a jury trial, and you have to give credence to the fact that people can often tell when you're lying. And so she did not come across well at all, which is why he won the case. But I think there's another aspect to this which is much bigger. It's about men and domestic violence, which is something we don't hear very often. And I think Johnny Depp now has brought up the fact that men can suffer from domestic violence. And I think we may see a lot more cases, because what we are seeing around the world, Malaysia included, is the majority of domestic violence cases, of course, are by women. We've seen a slight increase of the cases reported by men. But the question becomes this: is this really about the actual cases, or is this about the underreporting of men who suffer domestic violence? Because it's embarrassing for a man to claim that he's a victim of domestic violence. So to wrap it all up, I will just end with this to say that be careful who you marry, because this was a toxic relationship. And so they were both infatuated at the beginning, and look at how horribly it ended.
Right. Someday when I grow up, I'm going to think about really hard about who I'm going to marry. But I guess this whole Me Too movement, while I'm a big supporter of the Me Too movement, I think a lot of men have become victims of the Me Too woman, understanding what sexual harassment is, and someone walking up to you, liking you and talking to you. They're two different things. There are lots of compartments that need to be addressed that we haven't addressed. It's great to move with the Me Too movement, but there's a lot more that needs to be understood about it. Let's move to the next topic. Ehsan, you want to go for it? Or Murali, do you have something you want to add to what she said, what Ehsan said? Okay, we need your microphone on, please. Yeah, thank you.
Right. Okay. I think just to add to what Faridah is saying, there's a lot of mental health issues, at the kind of foundational problems between how people are interacting, how they're actually dealing with their issues. And this is increasingly something we're seeing in, perhaps to use the word very generally, millennials. So people are unable to sustain good long-term relationships. And a lot of it are the underlying kind of unhappiness, dissatisfaction, the inability to, interact in a wholesome manner, and as well as like understanding people's like boundaries. And we're seeing society go more and more into this, and it's accompanied, perhaps you can also see the number of suicides going up. So these are all kind of the cracks that are showing within the kind of cultural framework. And that's probably all that can be added at this point in time.
Right. So let's move to the US gun ownership problem. Ehsan, you wanted to talk about this too. I found something very interesting about this. So it was an article, an extensive article, okay, in the United States, so in the civilized world, that is. A report from Everytown Gun for Safety identified a direct correlation between states with weak gun laws and higher rates of firearms mortality. So there's 8 states, California, Hawaii, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, they go on. And there's another 13 states, Kansas, Alaska, Kentucky, Missouri, New Hampshire, Arizona, Oklahoma, 13 states there. So this article, in a roundabout way, goes to say that those 8 states with tight gun laws have seen very few gun problems. The 13 states with no gun laws see a lot of gun problems. I really don't know who wrote this piece, but having said that, it's blatantly there. You can see through the years, presidents have addressed just shootings in Texas alone, not the rest of America. And where do you want to go with this, Ehsan?
Well, I think number one, as we talk about mental problems and so on, whether we like it or not, in modern times, there are a lot of, shall we say, even highly developed societies such as the US. Some people will have their mental problems, and sometimes when they have guns, and especially so-called high caliber guns or other weapons available, well, then they might be very tempted to go start a shooting spree, as was the case, I think, about a week ago in Uvalde, a small town at the border of Texas and Mexico, where I think 20 mostly children were killed. But of course, there's still a majority, I think, of Americans who take their so-called Second Amendment rights very seriously. That is the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, guaranteeing the rights to bear arms for American citizens. Well, I think it because America started, the whole country started with a revolution, right? An armed insurrection or revolution against the British. So this sort of common folks owning guns type of culture is still very deep in many parts of the US. So on the one hand, you have that sort of a majority view that gun ownership should still be protected. And then you also have this increasing trend, which, as you pointed out, show that, well, if you don't let people have a lot of guns available, then the rate of this this sort of mass shootings would decrease. And that always, it's like another issue in the US, abortion and gun ownership or gun control remain perhaps the two most divisive societal issues in the United States, with typically two camps who are very distinct from one another. And whenever such a tragedy happened, you would see some lawmakers, they may say they want to have gun control laws and so on, but typically they would just fizzle out in a few months, because this sort of so-called gun lobby is simply too significant in the United States. Yeah.
Right. I just want to digress a little now and move on to Dr. Murali. So we've been talking for the past few weeks. Faridah, you've been in on some of these conversations too. Ehsan, you talked to us about this too. The Russia-Ukraine war, or the war in Ukraine. Now, a lot of people, a lot of Malaysians have different perspectives, or a different perspective on this war. But I guess to hear from someone who's lived in Russia, who speaks in Russian, writes Russian, we haven't done it here on our channel. What are your thoughts, Murali, about this whole thing? We're all trying to, at best, approximate what's going on here.
Yep. And the relationship between the Russians and the Ukrainians on a social and cultural level is actually very difficult to entangle. And that's really because for a long time, until Ukrainian independence is like in the late 90s, and then kind of the growth of these separate nations, they've been one country. I have classmates who half of them are Ukrainian by citizenship, and they have siblings who live and work in Russia. So for these countries it's actually even closer than a Malaysian-Indonesian like war, I hope it never comes to those kind of things, but it's even closer on that kind of level. So it's literally siblings who are now killing each other across the field. So there's a lot of sorrow. There's a lot of deep unhappiness on both sides, and really on a social level for the individual person, because there are many families who are worried about siblings, or sons, daughters who are dying on literally across the other side of the border. So and the politics has kind of I don't know, clouded this whole issue, so that it's no longer it's now being put as a struggle of two civilizations, and then of course there's the narrative of the West versus, the former kind of social.
Yeah, but I guess what we want to know is, how would you like us to sort of, with our thought processes, what would you like us as fellow Malaysians to start thinking about when we talk about the war? I know it's a coffee shop talk for us. It's like, oh no chicken lah. That's because of the Russian war. Is that? But it's more to it. And I know you broach this differently. How should we be broaching this when we talk about this? Public, diplomacy has always been a big thing for us. Yeah.
Right.
And we all have run in Kuala Lumpur and even in Malaysia. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the good things that Malaysia enjoys is good relationships with both sides. And we've always been kind of neutral within this space. And I think we should approach it from a humanitarian perspective, rather than being one of taking one side versus the other. I think it should be one of unifying again, this using the common kind of cultural background, the fact that, they are actually tied by blood now, literally. And perhaps that's the kind of narrative to take, rather than take it like, oh, Ukraine is being backed by the US, so it's a good thing, and the Russians are good. And on one side, some Malaysians are very happy because we're now socking it to the West, that kind of idea. So rather than approaching this on a very black and white perspective, I'm trying to advocate perhaps looking at the people on the ground who are actually dying, and whether that can actually be a commonality that can be used to bring together.
Okay, guys, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to try to pull this, and we want to talk about medicines and the pharmaceutical services. Apparently, there's a shortage of medicine, but I don't want to go there. I want to talk. We've got about 4 minutes left. Very quickly, because all of us are somehow linked to this, I want to talk about Hari Wartawan Nasional moving forward. So I looked at the different eras. There was the Mahathir era. All of us who worked then remember this. Badawi era, Najib era, PH era, and the PNBN era. Now, the PH era promised greater freedom, so on and so forth. Are all of us on the same page with this?
Well,
yes, no, that's all. That's all I'm looking for. Yes, no. Yeah.
Yes.
No, okay. So I did a bit of a study, and I look at all these eras, and I think the thing that opened up the media the most was the Badawi era with the, at that point you had the rise of bloggers. We're talking about just before 2008. So the 2008 tsunami, remember BN lost five states in the 2008 tsunami. And that was the rise of people out. We had brick on the wall. Then we had Papa Gomo. We had all these people come in. For me, that was the time the media opened up very much. Today we're here. The more I look at it, today we're here at this juncture because of that point when Badawi said, let's let this go for a little bit and see what happens. Your thoughts on this? We've got 4 minutes. Let's start with the lovely lady in the room, Faridah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump in because I saw the statement by the PM, I think at the National Journalist Day, the day that you're talking about, Gerard. And he was saying that something to the effect that the journalists or the media should have the freedom to report on whatever. But I think that the issue always comes back to the laws, the defamation laws, the libel laws. Those are the laws that to this day have not been amended and updated. So we can say whatever we want, but as long as the journalists are afraid that they could be thrown in jail for saying something, I think that is where the sort of the problem lies, because I believe there are some good journalists who are trying to follow the evidence, who are trying to report on the facts. But again, it's like tiptoeing around this issue because every prime minister will say, yes, we have freedom of the press. But of course, we also agree that it's not quite at the same level as what we see in the West. And that's okay because culturally we are a little bit different. But the issue remains that all these laws have to be repealed or amended so that journalists know what they're working with. And until that is done, we're just talking in circles, I think.
Right. Ihsan, I've got about 2 minutes left now. Yeah.
Well, also there's no protection for people like myself. There's no protection for commentators. You guys been fully credentialed journalists. You have your union. You have Journalists Without Frontiers and so on. A lot of associations will vouch for you. But for people like me who do a lot of commenting for the media, there's essentially no protection. I could be thrown in jail at any time, and I don't think there's a union or any sort of international organization that will come to my aid. So I think that is also another area in addition to the amendments of the relevant laws that should be looked into here.
Right. Dr. Murali? Ihsan, a very good point. We will definitely bring up another conversation about this. We'll have a half an hour just for that, okay? Try to see if we can...
Wow, Dr. Ihsan has now scared me. Talking heads will get chopped off. I think that's the take home for today.
But talking heads will get chopped off.
I think, talking heads will get chopped off. That's the headline. But yeah, I think you had a very good point. I think Badawi kind of during Tun Badawi's time, we had like an opening of the door, and I think after that it's just gotten wider and wider and wider. But accompanying, I think a lot of this has been the work of individual like individual journalists who have really like pushed the frontier. But I don't think there's an accompanying kind of protective framework kind of for us to fall back on. So it's not formalized, so the door could close at any time, and that's really the worry. So we should seize this opportunity to kind of solidify the opening doors so as they can
The door is definitely closing on our show now. We'll leave it at that. Talking heads will get chopped. So let's keep that as a lesson, guys. Thank you very much. We hope we'll have you back on the panel again, and we'll definitely take Ihsan up on this one. We'll talk about subject matter experts and if they have a union. On that note, on behalf of the team right here in the nation and our esteemed panel this week, I'm Gerard Ratnam signing off. Have a great weekend and enjoy a good Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Bye-bye.